Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is a show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of experts, and helping me do that today is Andrew Binstock, auctioneer and co-founder of Auction House London. Welcome.
Thank you.
And along with Andrew is Chris Buckler, CCO of the Agency UK. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
With particularly the London residential market losing value, have you seen an increase in the private vendors taking their property to auction to achieve a sale?
Yeah, we have. I mean, this isn't just a recent thing. Over the last few years, we've seen an extraordinary growth in what we'd call sort of owner-occupiers and users who are bringing their properties to market. They've been frustrated with the private treaty route. And because there is so much publicity around auctions now, TV shows like this, lots of press, and it's just become more accessible to people. So we've always thought of ourselves as an industry as we can never work out why not enough people were using auctions. You go to America, Australia, it's all auctions. You see it in the movies, you know, they had to stand outside the house and do these big flamboyant shows. But as an industry, we've always found it quite frustrating that we represent maybe only 2% of the market. And we can never understand why the general public don't understand that if you have competitive bidding, you're going to get more money and it's a quick sale. And the fact that transparency is so great now in auctions. You know, once upon a time, it was this sort of elite underground club full of developers and builders and people who really knew what they were doing. And now it's really just for anybody. So yeah, we are very keen as auctioneers to try and get that message out there that if you are frustrated with the current route, and even if you're not, use auctions first, but certainly think of us if you have struggled and you're worried that you're going to be sat there for another few more months and you want, you know, a slightly faster route out.
Andrew, you mentioned the sort of elite club side of things, but going back years and years and years, your average, I suppose, vendor, the private vendor that perhaps Chris would deal with, has always been rather frightened of the auction process and never really quite understood the mystery of it all, what you have to do to get on it, what you have to do to make your sale. It all seems very fast and efficient, but sometimes a bit too good to be true in some ways. So how has your industry changed to make it more accessible and understandable by the general public?
Well, first of all, compliance, I think, across all property avenues has gone, you know, we're in a totally different space now. The amount of things we have to do and the amount of hoops we have to jump through before we can even take the property on, never mind how we market it, never mind how it gets put to the buyers after it's already been bought. The truth of the matter is it was needed, because there is a sense of, there's not enough regulation in things like auctions. But ultimately, you have to disclose everything now. And quite honestly, I don't think there's any risk to buyers or sellers. And you're absolutely right. In the olden days, people just didn't really understand it. They thought, well, we're going to give it away. This is what I come across a lot with sellers. I don't want to give my house away. Well, you're not. You know, if you think about it just in the most sort of fundamental way, if you think of auctioning anything, no matter what that item is, you go to any charity there's, you know, signed football shirts, whatever. You know, if you've got enough people who want the item that you're bidding on, whoever pays the most has clearly paid a fair price for it. And isn't it better that the market decides what something's worth rather than one agent who may or may not be correct? And so I think that this myth of getting away from, well, I don't understand it. Historically, it was always just repossessions and probates and just people giving things away who have no emotional attachment to that building. That's long gone. We still have those clients, of course we do. But now there are so many more people who do understand it, thank God, and who appreciate it.
I think just to add to that as well, and we'll touch on this later, but the estate agencies evolved in the last few years in the UK, and a lot of agents have more of a fiduciary than maybe when you could just put it on the market and stuff would fly off the shelf, which means agents are referring secure sale or auction more because they're going in a lot of cases now, certainly down the self-employed routes, and they're going, right, I could put this for let, I could put this for sale, I could put this for auction or secure sale, and that fiduciary is now there. So I would say there's probably a lot more referrals from agents, certainly in the self-employed space, where London is tough out there at the moment, and genuinely doing the best for your client in the current market may well mean that auction referral, whereas previously, again, you put it on the market, it flies out. But also the changing landscape of estate agency as well means that fiduciary is there now where it maybe wasn't.
Actually, Chris makes a brilliant point on the process of, for example, making an offer prior to auction. So in the not that distant past, it was quite common for deals to be sold before the room even happened. So someone would make an offer, the client, be it a lawyer, be it somebody acting on behalf of a borrower or whatever it was, would take the offer and go, that's not bad. And then things changed because they were getting into trouble for not being deemed to have received a market fair price. Now, even if that offer was fantastic and huge, they were still coming up against this idea of it needs to go to a room and see the competitive bidding environment around it before anyone could say, yeah, you know what, that went for the right money.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you're saying. It's like you need to go through the process to prove that it was fair.
Yeah.
Do you, as an agent, see the auction room as an extension of your service?
100%. And actually, I'd argue no, I see it as a core part of our service. We have to be able to offer everything. And you made a great point earlier about, I'm a real geek when it comes to estate agency around the world, North America, Australia. I watch those guys the whole time. I see how they operate. Tom Panos is a huge auctioneer over in Sydney. I used to run a business over in the States. And for me, auction, gone are the days of auction is if something just can't sell, you chuck it in there, or it's not mortgageable, it doesn't have a kitchen and a bathroom or what have you. So for me, I think it's a core part of every agent service. But you are right in your opening remarks of agency in the UK, we're evolving, but it isn't in a great position. And what I mean by that is there are some great high street businesses, but on the whole, you have to stack them high, sell them low. And sometimes if you want to get your KPIs done or what have you, even though it's better to refer that client for a secure sale via the auction route, you need to get your 30 instructions a month and whatever else to keep the wolf from the door. So estate agents, unfortunately, my old American business partners would say they live in poverty in the UK because of the model and, again, that stack them high, sell them low approach and the low fees. So for me, I see it often where I'll go, we had a conversation off camera where I met someone last week and I said, my fiduciary advice to you is not to sell for 4 years due to political change and X, Y, and Z. And he was like, well, you've got the business now because you're just really honest, and everyone else has come out to me and gone, put them on at this price, which is, crazy in my view. So again, it has to be a core part of what agents do, but the model has to evolve because people still don't like agents in the UK.
All right, well, Chris, you'll be very pleased to know that your next question is about that very subject.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, I'm in the process of putting my flat on the market as the family needs require us to find a larger home. This will be the first time I've sold a property and wanted advice on how to choose the right agent. In the first instance, I've had 4 firms look at my property. 2 called themselves brokers and 2 called themselves agents. Can the panel tell me what the difference is, please? In addition, their advice on selling price was so vastly different. How can I best decide which of them is right?
The difference between an agent and a broker, again, I talked earlier about North American and Australian models, which essentially is the brokerage model where the agent is self-employed. They pay a brokerage a nominal amount and then a percentage of the commission when the deals come through. Where an agent is employed, they go out, list properties, they're on a salary, and they will take a very, very small piece of the commission when the property goes through to sell. So fundamentally, the difference between the two there is one has a fiduciary in situ, it's their own business. Their reputation is key. They certainly for referral and repeat business. And they are there at every point of the client journey. The agent that goes out and values your property in the majority of cases isn't the person that sells it. And you're in more of a conveyor belt machine. Now, like I said earlier, there's some brilliant high street models, but we're massively evolving and moving towards this brokerage space, which is something I'm super passionate about because the client gets the much better end result. Now, in regards to the spread, when I sold my last property where I live in Chislehurst, we had I think it was like a 32% variance in the price, which was criminal. And it was interesting that we had all agents come out, and they all came out with a Rightmove best price guide. they kind of half knew, what's called a premium price guide now, half knew the square footage, didn't know what we did, didn't know our rationale for selling. Whereas the broker will know what's your opportunity cost of not selling. They'll have done all the research before. They'll probably have done all the pre-qualifications before, so they can provide you, again, you'll hear me use the word fiduciary, but that fiduciary advice on how to sell, when to sell, what it should look like. And in this instance, most likely probably negotiate on your onward. And see the whole process through. So for me, there are some wonderful high street agents out there. I don't want to be on here today bashing them, but the broker will have your fiduciary at the heart of everything they do. Yeah. When it comes to pricing, certainly in today's market, you have to price to entice. What the brokers will do is often come up with a strategy, a marketing strategy, and pricing is strategy. I think vendors sometimes forget that. And it's very easy to go with an agent that says, well, we're a low fee and we reckon we'll get you the highest amount because we've been here for 30 years and we've got a database, etc. What often is the case, certainly in London, I could scare you that only 38.7% of properties that are listed actually sell, and around 32% that are listed have a price reduction. So you look at it and go, what? That's crazy. So what you'll tend to see is lengthier contracts with agencies that will try at a higher price and then hit you with a price reduction. If you do that, these are Rightmove's own stats, it's going to take you twice as likely to sell and you're twice as likely to fall through. Okay. Whereas if you come on with a price that's correct and in line with what it should be, you're far more likely to sell and exceed that price. The final piece, I know we're slightly tight for time on this, but I'm super passionate on it, is you have to price correctly. And if you don't, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble, because if you reduce, it works out a lot worse for you in the long run.
Okay, thank you. Well, on that note, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So we'll go to the break now. Join me again after the break when I'll be asking Andrew and Chris more of your questions. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with Andrew Binstock and Chris Buckler. I'm Stephen Galpin, and here we go with some more questions. Andrew, historically, properties difficult to sell or often with structural problems have needed auctions to sell them. However, I'm noticing now that many more properties that are on the market with agents are now appearing in the auctioneers' catalogues. Do the experts think that this trend will continue? And if so, what is the driver?
People are getting very frustrated now with having their properties on the market for a long period of time. And of course, as we were just discussing before, it's a process of reduce, and then eventually it comes to what do I do now? Structural problems historically have always done well at auction. Anything that doesn't require, but anything that's a cash buyer only has always been that kind of path. But we do have loads of people now that will bring their normal properties to auction, which do require mortgage lending or bridging finance or whatever it might be. And these are all fine as long as that particular buyer has done some homework on it. And we see it, as you say, what's the driver? It's frustration a lot of the time. We live in a country which is so heavily weighted in the private treaty route to market. Estate agency is just the traditional thing that everyone seems to know about. And auctions, even though we are in 2026, seems to still be a slightly unknown quantity. We talked about how that has changed a lot, but it is still only representing under 2% of the marketplace. How do we get more of those properties in? Hopefully, as Chris was talking about, once that frustration level kicks in and once something's been on the market for a while, we can drive those people to auction a little bit faster. And actually, the best properties at auction, the ones that do the work the most for the seller, are the ones that have never been on the open market before. There's that sense of freshness, that kind of unique, I've never seen this before. Once it's done 6 months on Rightmove, as you say, I mean, who really wants something that everyone else doesn't want? If it's been rejected for months on end, unless the price is now rock bottom, it's much harder. If you bring a property to auction straight away, then there's that kind of fresh, new wow factor.
Obviously, a lot of the thought about taking a property auction is that, well, will people who need a mortgage be able to buy, because the time scale at auction is very short. You perhaps give them 30 days to do your completion.
Yeah, exactly correct. Yeah, 28.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, we've had the advent of bridging loans, which have, I suppose, have been a godsend for you in the auction.
They've exploded. Yeah, absolutely. Tons of them.
But the private individual buying a property for their own use as a home rather than an investment is not going to be au fait with sort of bridging procedures and bridging applications. They're going to be thinking in terms of mortgages as we all know them for our homes. How do you cope with that in terms of the time scale? Are people having to put in place sort of theoretical application approvals before they come to you? Or
So it's a brilliant question,
how
because
does it work?
bridging is that last resort, is that panic moment. So as you correctly point out, it's 28 days, 20 working days, however you want to dress it up, for completion typically. So the gavel comes down. Most people don't panic at that moment. They've won it, they're excited, they're happy, they think they've got their route to finance in place, be it through a mortgage or family loan or whatever it might be. And only when that time starts to go and they're like, hold on, the survey still hasn't been done yet. And the, as you know, the risk of losing that deposit becomes more and more real as that completion date edges ever closer. So can you buy with a mortgage? Of course you can. Should you get a mortgage in principle before you stick your hand in the air? Of course you should. Is there a danger that it might not value up? Very rarely. We don't see that. Typically a mortgage will fail because the buyer themselves has not done their necessary DD in getting their mortgage approved, during that process. The advent of bridging lenders, honestly, it baffles me how many people are in that space now. And they are obviously providing an incredible service, and they are stopping people from losing their deposits. Because let's be honest, you buy a £400,000 flat in London and you don't get your finance in place in time, that vendor has every right to take your £40,000 if you don't complete on the right time and after your notice period is expired. So yes, you can get a mortgage. Yes, you can bid at auction comfortably and with the safety if you require finance. Should you keep your eyes open to the escape parachute of a bridging lender if you need it? Of course, because that's what they're there for. And in fact, I think a lot of the bridging clients that we deal with, people just go to them straight away.
Yeah.
They used to be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Market competition, market forces has brought their rates down.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, they provide an unbelievable service.
Yeah.
Stephen, you could call up a bridging lender and say, my completion date's tomorrow, and they'll give you an answer in an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool, right? And so they are providing an incredible help to the auction marketplace for sure.
Yeah. Just very briefly, what a lot of things we're here in the studio here, we talk to property people all the time. And one of the consistent complaints that one hears is the length of time conveyancing takes, and how slow the lawyers are. And there are a number of reasons for this. A lot of the, shall I say, run-of-the-mill law firms don't do conveyancing anymore, or don't specialise in it because of all the cut price conveyancing and all this sort of thing. It's just not worth it for them. The only time perhaps they'll do it is when it's a family member that they've dealt with for years, you know, and they're not always that au fait with leasehold regulations and laws. They have to look it all up. And this all takes time. How often do you hit that sort of problem?
Very rarely.
Trying to hit you 30 days.
So the beauty of auctions is that the legal pack is already online. So the seller's solicitor is the one that is in charge.
Okay.
They have to upload an entire legal pack prior to the auction taking place. Now, we as auctioneers determine what a fair amount of time is. Typically, we say try and get it up at least a week before the auction to give bidders the right amount of time to do their DD and have it all checked. But ultimately, you could argue if the legal pack goes up, the morning of, it's not the end of the world. If the buyer's happy to buy based on a very quick read through themselves, or they use a service to read it for them. But the reality is this: once the auction has happened, the gavel's down, the conveyancer acting for the purchaser should be on it. I mean, they shouldn't really have to do very much. They've got the legal pack right there. It's been sent to them. Yeah. But as you say, they're not all amazing. And
I'm wondering if we oughtn't to go back to the days of seller packs and have that on have it on the agency side.
Well, I think it's one of the, everyone's a bit worried about AI and is it going to replace us? But I think one of the things that I specifically see in terms of transaction lengths in the UK, or where AI will come in, it will be how to say this without doing conveyancers a disservice. A lot of the stuff is answering basic questions and moving stuff around. It's not corporate M&A, right? It just fundamentally isn't. So a lot of it's question response. And I fundamentally believe AI will replace a lot of, certainly by 2030,
I'm sure,
conveyancers.
Here's a really important point. The seller solicitor is not obliged to answer a single question at auction. So they have done their bit. So the auction's happened, here's the legal pack. Now, a nice solicitor might answer some questions, but they're not obliged. It's not like private treaty where they're obliged. If the buyer's solicitor says, hold on, what's this? They can go complete radio silence, leave that time frame to expire, and then it's down to the buyer to perform or not. So that's, to answer your original question, Stephen, that we have seen, where the buyer's solicitor seems to need more information than was originally provided, and then we might see the odd hiccup.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I'm about to put my leasehold flat on the market, but I'm told by agents that although the lease has about 970 years left on it, the fact that I have to pay ground rent and a fairly high service charge will put me at a disadvantage now that the effects of the new freehold legislation has come into play. Has the panel any advice for me?
Yes, so I'll break that down. Overnight, you're pretty much close to freehold with that whatever it was, right? 9.7. So that's not an issue, first and foremost. If we look at service charges, as long as the service charge is proportionate to what you're getting back, and in some very rare cases, it isn't, and mortgageability is slightly harder in that regard. But on the whole, service charge isn't necessarily the worst issue. Where there is a potential issue here is the ground rent piece. And if you're selling a flat, it will have been built, certainly in London, in the last 10, 20 years. New flats have what we call peppercorn. So the ground rent essentially is zero. So it's going to create what I would believe is almost a two-tier market. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I won't bore you with the legislation and the Acts 2022 and 2024 essentially, but essentially there are some things coming that have been proposed by the current government, a draft bill which will say that by about 2028 we reckon ground rents will be reduced to £250. The issue we have there is deeds of variation and logistics and how this comes in. So I can't give an exact answer because no one knows. What I would say is the market will essentially decide what it should go on at and what that should look like. In this, if it's so hard because there's so many variables in this instance.
I mean, sorry, just to interrupt you. It's the same really. It's when the government are going to say, all right, you've got to allow pets within your flats if you let them out. Well, that's all very well, but what happens if the head lease of that building says no pets? So which takes precedence, the government's instruction or the lease that you and the landlord have signed?
This is where it gets really messy, because one option you could have here if you didn't need to move is wait until 2028 and see if the 250 comes in. Now, that's not always practical.
That comes back to your advice, don't sell for the next 4 years.
Yeah, pretty much, right? My take here is the government have very, very good intentions of wanting to, you see things where they double every 10 years and the compound means that properties become unmortgageable, and they're pretty nasty, some of the original leases that were in situ. So I can see the rationale behind it, and I actually support it, even though there's going to be a load of people that built their business on on buying these books and everything else. So I do agree with it in principle, but how's it going to be enforced? Who's going to pay for that? Is it going to be challenged and appealed and appealed and appealed? And are we going to end up in a messy situation where you're no further along in 4 years? So for me, I would, if I'm looking to move, was it upsizing?
Yes.
In this instance, you have to put your property on the market, prep it the very best way you can, but know that it, compared to the new build next door, you're not going to be hitting the same price per square foot, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both very much indeed. I'm going to say a big thank you to Andrew Binstock. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
And to you, Chris, thank you very much for coming in today. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.